Hello, good morning. Hey, thanks for joining us. So there is a lot of people in the room I know, but I'm very curious, like people I don't know and if they are familiar with TripleO. So welcome to the session. This is a project update about the TripleO project. My name is RabbitMQ. I work on TripleO. Yeah, so before anything, I have stickers. I will distribute them after the session, and I will bring them to me to all the TripleO sessions today. So feel free to come to me and grab one of them. That's the slides. If you want to look at them, they are also on Twitter if you look for the session. And I will send it to the mailing list afterward. On the agenda for today, so this is a 15-minute presentation, and we have 5 minutes for Q&A. Feel free to stand up and ask any question. We have a microphone, and the session will be recorded and posted on YouTube. So who are we? Hi, this is the TripleO team who traveled to Dublin in February. That's where we worked together to design the next release, which is Rocky. I think today we are going to discuss about what we have done in Queens and what we are going to do in the Rocky cycle. But first, I would like to know who in the room doesn't know what is TripleO. Okay, cool. And who in the room already deploys TripleO in their company or outside of work? Who is deploying TripleO today? Okay, cool. So someone doesn't know TripleO, so I will explain. TripleO is it's an OpenStack installer, but it's not just about installing OpenStack. It's also about upgrading and operating OpenStack. So TripleO, the foundation of TripleO is to use the OpenStack services to deploy OpenStack. So like I said, we install, upgrade, and operate OpenStack. And you will see a lot of services that we use from OpenStack to deploy the infrastructure. One of the graphs that we like to share is this one. We use a lot of projects to deploy TripleO. One of the results of TripleO is that you deploy an infrastructure where you have compute services like Nova, Glance, Swift, Neutron, etc. And you have extra services that you can deploy like telemetry, Sahara, Manila, and Heat, and more. Of course, there is more. At the foundation, we use Heat, Mistral, and other services like we use Swift and Zakar, but we also use tools like Ansible. I think everyone is familiar with Ansible in the room, but if you don't know Ansible, it's a deployment tool that we use to deploy and upgrade OpenStack. We also use Docker for the services that we containerize. And finally, we also use the Puppet modules for configuration management. So when you want to deploy TripleO, there are usually 3 phases. The first one is the planning. So the planning is usually like before the deployment, you're going to prepare the network topology and prepare your environment before the deployment, understand the parameters, and so either you use the CLI or the UI, you will have a lot of parameters that will make your deployment flexible for your use case, and you will also do your you will also look at how many nodes do you want to deploy and which roles you want to assign to each node. So that kind of thing is part of the planning. And then you go ahead with the deployment. So during the deployment, we have some validations that can actually verify that the services, that the planning has been done correctly. So you can certify that the network is ready, you have enough storage, and you have all the parameters configured correctly. So you can deploy and reduce the risk of error. And And then during the deployment, you will see the services being containerized and being configured and deployed. The last thing, which is something that the team is working, like we have been focusing on that for the last releases, is the operation. How do you upgrade? How do you scale out? And if you want to apply minor updates, major upgrades, if you want to install new service on an existing deployment, so that kind of things we are also doing. If you have more questions about TripleO itself, I'm very happy to answer them at the end of the session. So I thought useful to share some numbers with you. Over the last cycle, we have seen quite interesting numbers. The number of bugs in TripleO, the number of bugs that we close is kind of interesting to look. If you remember Pike, that's the release where we containerized the services, and that's where we had a few large number of bugs. If you remember Okata, that's where we introduced the composable upgrades, and afterward we got some feedback from the operators, and we had a bunch of bugs related to that. So the number of bugs that we solved in Pike was kind of huge comparing to after and before. But where we are right now in Rocky, we are still in a good position to fix the same amount of bugs that we fixed in Queens. So the team is doing pretty well right now. I have another slide about the contributors, but the blueprints, so again on Pike, if you remember, that was the containerization. We had many blueprints regarding that feature. In Queens, if you remember as well, we focused more on stabilization, so reducing the number of blueprints and focusing more on the bugs that we closed. So hopefully that thing can be visible on Launchpad, where we try to track how many bugs did we solve and how many blueprints did we implemented. So that kind of thing is visible. Something interesting in Rocky is that by milestone 1, we closed, as far as I remember, it's 15 blueprints by the end of milestone 1. So that's pretty high comparing to the previous releases. And still the number of blueprints that we close, milestone 2 is still ongoing, so we are still looking at closing more blueprints. So so far so good for Rocky cycle. The number of core reviewers is also a good sign of the project. We still have a growing chart of core reviewers in the project. We haven't, as far as I know, we haven't lost people, like a lot of people in the project who contribute. So we have regular contributors and we have occasional contributors. But if you look at the numbers right now, the number of contributors is always growing over the last years. So that's pretty cool. And again, the release is not finished, so who knows if the chart will be even higher in Rocky. The number of commits, it's also an interesting data. In Rocky, we are still, we haven't, I think we will go beyond Queens again. And again, Queens was stabilization, so we haven't pushed many code that we will do in Pike or previously, so that kind of expected. But Rocky is still in a good position where we will push more code than we did in Queens. Same for the line of code. We are almost at the end of milestone 2, and we have reached beyond the half of Queens statistics so far. So that's also a good sign that Rocky will be a release where we push more features than Queens. So what we did in Queens, so I have 2 slides. This is just like a reminder about what we have done in Queens. I won't go into details because I don't have much time, but the major things that we have done is config download, which is disabled by default. So config download is the ability to use Ansible to apply the configuration. And so before you had something like the heat agent and OS collect config that will be running on the cloud nodes and that will apply the configuration locally. So we we had a few challenges regarding scalability and also how operators could reproduce the deployments. So we implemented something called config download, which will generate the configuration that will apply for the nodes, and you can actually download the configuration on the undercloud that will be actually represented as Ansible playbooks. So you can download all these all the Ansible playbooks, and a lot of things that HIT was doing has been converted to some Ansible playbooks and roles. So that's a big topic for us, like moving forward to Ansible, converting a lot of HIT resources into Ansible playbooks, so the community understands more what TripleO is doing. Ansible is a very popular tool today, so that's where we are heading now. So again, the feature was disabled by default, but if you want to give it a try, we are very happy to get some feedback, although the feature is enabled by default in Rocky. So that's something you definitely want to look at if you plan to deploy the Rocky release. The second big feature that we have implemented in Queens was the fast forward upgrades, also known as FFU. If you haven't heard of it, there are many sessions during the summit about FFU, but basically in a nutshell, when you deploy OpenStack Newton and you don't want to upgrade if you don't want to upgrade to Okata, Pike, and Queens yourself, you can use something called the FFU that will upgrade you, that will take the control plane offline, and that will take you directly from Okata in rolling upgrade that will take you from Newton to Okata to Pike and Queens. So we don't skip releases, but we upgrade continuously from Newton to Queens in a rolling manner. So that's pretty nice what they did, and that's working in Queens. And again, the target is to upgrade from Newton to Queens, and yeah, that's how it is now. On the UI front, there are many things. I could not list them in one slide, but there are two things I know that have been quite cool. The node registration is streamlined from the UI, and you can control the custom roles from the UI as well, which is kind of useful in a complex deployment where you have advanced architectures and custom roles. Other things that we have done in Queens was the IPsec supports. So there are many use cases. Yesterday in a session, I've heard about the edge computing and people doing end-to-end encryption. So TripleO now support the IPsec the IPsec protocol, sorry. So you can deploy the overcloud, and you can encrypt the whole network with the IPsec. So that's pretty nice. It works with Ansible, and so you can reuse the role outside of TripleO, and you can also deploy TripleO with this Ansible role. There is also the support for instance high availability. So that's something that will evacuate the instance. If there is an instance like a VM controlled by Nova, if the VM would fail for some reason, the VM will be evacuated and respawn on another compute node. So that's something that was also done in Queens. We also have a lot of cases that meets the NFV requirements. One of them is the real-time support. So the real-time compute nodes and the real-time roles for NFV. And one of the last big things that we have done in Queens is supporting Octavia, the load balancing as a service in OpenStack. So looking at Rocky now, I have 4 slides, and just checking the time. OK, so I have 6 minutes left. So config download, like I said, is now enabled by default. So that's something you really want to look at. The config download is translating a lot of things that we did before with HIT into Ansible playbooks. And that's enabling the operators to run part of the deployment themselves. And if they have any problem, they can debug. It's directly available in the Ansible logs. So that's something pretty nice. We also, in Rocky, we are going to containerize the undercloud. The backward compatibility will be maintained. The upgrade will be supported from Queens to Rocky. So in Queens, you have a non-containerized undercloud, and we will manage the upgrade to take you to a containerized undercloud. So that's something we are working on. And we will provide the parity with the previous in-stack undercloud projects. The second slide shows you that we are also looking at the routing networks. So you could have overcloud deployment with multiple subnets. So we implemented the PXE boot process via DHCP relay. And so that's basically the whole idea around that is to scale up the number of networks on the overcloud. We also provide a container image prepare workflow. So that's the way you will prepare the containers before the deployments. So that's something we are looking at. So you can modify the containers on your local registry beforehand and perform the deployment afterward. So that's kind of use cases you also want to look. The image prepare workflow means that on the overcloud, the container preparation will be done by a Mistral workflow that you can run from the CLI directly, and you won't have well, you can look further at the future, but basically it's extending the capabilities of preparing the containers. We are going to target the support of separated RPC and notification messaging backends. So for now, we only support RabbitMQ, but on the long term, we are looking ahead at other backends that we have in Oslo messaging. But one of the big work that was done in Rocky is separate the configuration for RPC and notifications. We have a lot of SRUV and NAV improvements. The last thing of this slide is the day 2 operation tooling. So we have people looking at creating some Ansible roles to manage TripleO on the day 2 after deployment. So just how you will restart the containers, how would you get the logs, and all the things you want to do as an operator. So we are looking at that right now. And on the last slide, it's more about, I try to put other things that we are doing. So undercloud backup and restore improved. We will probably support designate, so the DNS as a service in OpenStack. We support the Blue Store version of Ceph in TripleO. And we also have we will provide the multi-arc support for other processors. We are working on, because we are deploying with containers, we are working on cleaning up the images. So the OpenStack image won't have all the packages from OpenStack because we don't need them anymore. Anyway, we have more than this, but Rocky is definitely a big release for us. We are going to deliver a lot of things, not just bug fixes, but also a lot of blueprints. Stay tuned on that. Beyond Rocky, we are looking at the all-in-one installer, so like a capability of deploying TripleO on one node. So you will not have an undercloud and overcloud. You will have one node, and you will provision the node on deploying OpenStack. We are looking at some use cases with the edge computing. So let's say today you want to start with one node, and tomorrow you want to scale up with 10 nodes. So that's kind of things we are looking at right now. The UI team is looking at the networking without from the UI. And we have some people looking at managing multiple clusters on the overcloud. A lot of things. So cross-project, I will go very briefly on that. We collaborate a lot with OpenStack community, OpenStack Infra with Zul v3 transition, Ironic, routing networks, IPv6, containerization of Ironic, and a lot of things basically just to show you that TripleO is not just about deploying OpenStack for TripleO, it's about making OpenStack better. And when you look at what we are doing in the community, it's really something available for anyone. You don't have to use TripleO to take benefit of what we are doing. We try to build things that you can reuse without TripleO, and we try to build community around the project that we are building. And I'm running out of time, so I will just invite you to the next session, which is the onboarding. And if you want to stay in touch, OpenStack Dev, the weekly OR, IRC, and documentation. Today, 11:50 a.m., join the room 223, and thank you for your time. And sorry we don't have time for questions, but I'm staying here and we can talk all day if you want.